I like the long stretches of beach, the open spaces, and the community that we live in. I'm Lisa McDermott and I work at Wangaling Beach Library as the branch administrator.
And I'm Michael McDermott and I'm the Work Health and Safety Coordinator at Cassowary Coast Regional Council. We were lucky enough to live in the lower North Shore part of Sydney. We were there for about 5 years. We moved up to the Central Coast and then up to Bargara, which is near Bundaberg. And then we made the next step up to Mission Beach. And we've been here for about 10 years. I love my job because of the diversity of the role. I can be at a construction site, talking with our construction staff about safe work practices. I can then move on to a toolbox talk, which is where we try and educate our staff on different work health and safety practices. And then I could move into a meeting with our executive management team, which keeps it interesting and challenging. My greatest goal is to ensure that our staff go home safe.
I've worked for Cassowary Coast Libraries for 5 years now. Over the past few years, Wangaling Beach Library has experienced growth and we will be renovating the space to meet these needs. The community will have opportunity to attend more activities, have quiet space, and just increasing the scope of the library for our community. A day at the library can be quite versatile. We have children's programs. We run for the Littlies, Storytime Baby Bounce, and after-school programs for the primary school-aged kids with robotics. We also tailor to our older community by offering tech-savvy senior classes, and we can just have our general day-to-day people using the computers, borrowing items, and can be quite a little busy hub. The most rewarding part of the job is seeing the community day-to-day, so faces of people that you might see down the street on the beach coming into the library to use our facility and for their entertainment purposes or just to come and enjoy our quiet space. In our spare time, we like to walk along the beach, do rainforest walks, and just really enjoy our environment on the weekends. At times you'll see me at home on the couch reading a book, trying to catch up with the avid readers we have here at the library. Since moving to Mission Beach, we've made it our home and we wouldn't want to live anywhere else. We've been further south and have migrated north, and this is as far as we'll go.
Fellow councillors, staff and residents viewing live stream, good morning all and welcome. I acknowledge the traditional owners, past, present and emerging. Do we have any apologies? I'll take that as a no. Conflict of interest and material conflict of interest. Please use this opportunity to make public any material personal interest and or conflicts of interest, real or perceived, in respect of the items in the agenda. Councillors should use this opportunity to disclose and or comment on other councillors and or staff interest in accordance with the Act and the regulations. Councillors, do we have any conflicts to declare? I'll take that as a no. We move on to our first item of business, the confirmation of the minutes. Would somebody move that those minutes are a true and accurate record, please? Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Any business arising from the previous minutes? Okay, thank you for that. We move on to item 3, community and culture, and we have our librarian to present. Over here she is. Ms Williams will present this report.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I'm going to present the library side of this report, and then I'll hand over to Ms Brennan to do the customer service. So libraries have been a little bit quiet since we reopened because we've had such restricted services. However, we are now starting to open up a little bit more, particularly from this week. So this was a little bit of a brief report on what has been happening. For the school holidays, instead of our normal in-house school holiday program, we decided to present a program, an online program, in lieu of the regional shows that have been cancelled this year. So normally the children would have an opportunity at those regional shows to present their art and craft work. So we've done the no-show library show for the school holidays, and I have to say we've had some wonderful entries for that competition, and some of them are displayed in the libraries around the area, so I do urge you to go and have a look at them because they are really, there's some really talented people out there. Our local history area, we have always archived copies of the local newspapers, and of course with those newspapers now either moving online or not being published at all, we have been monitoring what the State Library and the National Library are, how they're going about keeping digital copies of various things like that. So we are monitoring what's going on there. And but in the meantime, we'll continue to provide copies of the papers that are available. And as of this week, we have put those newspapers back in the library. So that's been a welcome addition. I was very pleased that for the final edition of the Innisfail Advocate that our local history staff were able to provide a lot of images from past copies of the newspaper, which you would have all seen the front cover of the newspaper. So that was a really good thing to see. They, Advocate came and approached us and asked for those. So we were able to dig up quite a few old copies of the newspapers to have that on their front cover. We have extended the contracts for our Centrelink access points at the Cardwell and Mission Beach libraries. This is a really well-used community service, and but it's used not just by the community, it's also by a lot of people that are travelling through the region, so they can come to those libraries. Centrelink provide all of the equipment. There's computers, there's printers, there's phone lines direct through to Centrelink, and they can do all their business there as they're moving through the region. We currently have 2 staff members that are doing some online study through the Australian Library and Information Association, and this is to do with community engagement. So they're learning how to make those community connections and establish partnerships, and from what I can hear, they've been learning some really useful things in that area. And I can just report that the Cardwell Museum Precinct is reopening, I think, this weekend for visitors. So the visitor centre's been open, but with just doorway access. But now the museums will open up as well, with restrictions, of course, for how many people can be in there. And I just wanted to, I'll probably continue to talk about the local history area and the project that we've got there, which is to identify and record every item we have onto one register. And that's across all of our locations. So those locations include the Innisfail Library Local History Room, we've got 2 rooms over there, the Dorothy Jones Tully Library collection there, and then of course the Cardwell Heritage Precinct, and all of the buildings there, and then we also have a few items at the depots at Cardwell and Tully. So we're assessing all of those items and their relevance to local history, the condition of the item, the storage standards, and then identifying items against the original registers, which there were several, and then migrating them to the new register. As part of that, we have identified a few areas in the actual physical buildings that don't really comply with archival processes. So we've got some new shelving in and just repainting a few things, and also the proper ordering the proper archival boxes to keep all of our, particularly newspapers and paper-based items. And we're also started recording the number of internal and external inquiries that we get for local history. So this is something we haven't done in the past, but it's a great way of identifying what type of inquiries we're getting. We do get lots of internal inquiries too, I might add. So they relate to family history, local maps, Indigenous histories, and just about the building, the area in general, I should say, cyclones, businesses, names and things like that. And I've put a small table in here for our library door count statistics, just doing a comparison to the same period last year. And as you can see, there's been quite a huge downturn in the amount of people coming through the doors. However, I can report that our loans, so people borrowing, the items that people borrow, have shown a much smaller decrease. So while there's not that many coming in, we're still seeing quite a good statistics on our loans. And as of this week, we have added chairs and tables back into the library, so people can now come in and sit for a while. The newspapers are back in, so they can read the newspapers. And we're just starting a staged resumption of our programs. And I just had a quick look at the door count before I came across this morning for the 3 days this week compared to the first 3 days of last week, and there is a significant change in the amount of people coming through the door, a positive change. So I'm really pleased to see that, and hopefully that will continue. And that's the end of the library's part.
Thanks, Ms Williams. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Chewy.
Mine is not a question, just a comment. Firstly, I'd like to thank you very much, Ms Williams, for your team for creating the no-show library show. I think as a community, as a Cassowary Coast, we all understand the importance of our shows, and I think most of us are very, very sad that there's no show. So we've got this to look, to look forward to. I'd just like to also mention that in 2017, the Tully Show celebrated its 80th year, and a Facebook competition was launched asking for people to post their old show pictures. We all stood at the front gate and with our handbags and frilly dresses. Some of those pictures were made into large storyboards, and these, I believe, are now available on display at the library and also in the Tully office. Library. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so congratulations. I think it's well worth having a look at those photos. They're great. I'd also like to commend you because of that, the Tully Chamber of Commerce have also become inspired, and they are busy creating an event called the Faux Show. So they haven't actually set a date because they're working hard to get it right, but my understanding is that they're going to ask the shops in the street to theme their shop window, so when you're walking down the main street of Tully, it feels like you're in the pavilion at the show. So I think that's a great thing.
That's fantastic.
The community will come out, and also we're promoting the shop locally. So well done for your team for inspiring the town. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chewy. Any further questions or comments to the officer? If not, I would ask somebody to move that the report be received and noted. Moved by
Catherine to go with the customer service.
Okay,
part.
yep. Ms Brennan, you're going to present, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everybody. So customer service, we are well and truly open. Our numbers continue to increase. We continue to use COVID-safe distancing. Our customer requests, whilst down on the same time, our customer calls, whilst down on the same time as last year and the year previous to that, the requests themselves are increasing. So you can see call volumes being down, email and internet increasing. And when you actually look at the data and you see the kind of customer requests that are coming through, if I look at the top 20 from this year as opposed to last year, the complexity within those customer requests is significantly increased. So you start to see a pattern that a customer request is touching a lot more departments, it's touching a lot more people within those departments, and you start getting a real picture of people becoming quite savvy about what their council could do for them and asking us quite in detail information. So that's quite interesting. So we're going to keep seeing that as a trend, I think, and you'll start seeing a lot more of those journeys that customers take with us. We've noticed, and we will improve on those processes and those systems. So I think that's a really important note out of this post-COVID world that we live in. If you continue with the report, you can see the actual number of requests there. The top 5 remain the same. Facilities are increasing, so people are very well aware that in this increased rainfall, there's a lot more potholes. So it's definitely following that seasonality. We have got an amazing amount of compliments given to our phone staff. So whilst a facility for online compliments is in the works, because I think it's a really important thing to capture, we get so many compliments for the staff via phone. So internally we've got a bit of a system going now that we send them around, because it's really important that our customers, once their request is resolved, they actually take the time. Your community takes the time to actually thank our team. And I think that's a really, really important point, that when you're speaking to these people who raise a pothole request, who talk to you about their wheelie bins, when they get them resolved, they compliment this team. And that's really, really good to see. I'd also like to just briefly mention, you can see the answered calls and the abandoned calls. The abandoned call rate was significantly up if any member of the team is away. And given we are just now entering into a peak demand period, so we've got a few extra registrations and services that Council have put in place. Every single one of those decisions that we make has a flow-on effect to the amount of calls and amount of emails that we get, and we've resourced up accordingly. So you'll see that the abandoned call rate, which means after a customer calls us, how long it takes, once they get through the IVR at the start, once they get through the recorded message, how long it takes for our person to physically answer the phone is significantly dropped, because we're resourced up accordingly. So that's quite a good thing to mention to your community when they say anything to you. So it's good news all round for customer service.
Thank you, Ms Brennan. Any questions or comments, councillors? If not, I would ask for a mover that the report be received and noted. Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Chewy. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you. We now move on to Planning and Regional Development, item 4.1, and Ms Newman will present this report.
Good morning, councillors.
Morning, Ms Newman.
Through the Chair, councillors in receipt of an application for a material change of use for a storage shed, which falls under the definition of a warehouse in the planning scheme. The application was prepared by Gilvia Planning on behalf of P&A Gill Proprietary Limited for the establishment of the storage shed within the rural zone situated at 162 Marillion Harbour Road, Marillion. The applicant has proposed to establish the storage shed on the site to be used to store equipment and materials used in association with the Australian Illuminated Signs business. This includes the storage of portable traffic lights, variable message signs, variable speed limit signs, and portable lighting towers, including trailers, which are supplied for hire and rental throughout an extensive area of far north Queensland, with the estimated maximum rentals being 200 per year. The applicant has also proposed some additional space within the storage shed for future self-storage business, which would allow the general public to hire space to store their possessions. The warehouse is proposed to comprise a single-storey shed structure with a maximum height of 5 metres and a floor area of just over 329 square metres. 9 car parking spaces are to be provided on the hardstand concrete apron proposed on the western edge of the shed. The application was impact accessible, however, Council did not receive any submissions during the public notification period. The proposed development is a small-scale commercial activity on a rural property which generates jobs whilst providing a service for the wider locality. The open rural nature of the immediate area, as well as the associated vistas, will not be significantly altered through the construction of a single-storey 5-metre high shed on the eastern portion of the site only, which is consistent with a number of other existing sheds in the surrounding locality. A landscaping buffer will be conditioned along the frontage to Marillion Harbour Road for the full length of the driveway access, which will screen and soften the shed. The site does not contain any areas of environmental significance and is not identified as being good quality agricultural land. The proposal is for storage purposes only, and as such will not result in any unreasonable nuisance or disturbance to adjoining properties. The property adjoins cane fields to the rear and an unformed road reserve to the west, from which it is set back 80 metres. The shed is oriented to the west and all car parking is proposed on the western side. Nevertheless, a landscaping buffer will also be conditioned along the common boundary with the property to the east. It will be conditioned that the use is limited to storage only and does not involve industrial uses, including but not limited to major servicing of vehicles and other noise-generating activities, including the operation of machinery and equipment. It will also be conditioned that noise from the site does not emanate from the land to a degree which would create an environmental nuisance. The application is generally consistent with the requirements of the planning scheme and does not raise any significant issues that cannot be addressed by reasonable and relevant conditions. Therefore, the proposed application, material change of use for a warehouse, is recommended for approval subject to conditions.
Thank you, Ms Newman. Any questions, councillors, for the officer? Councillor Farinelli, you're going to move the motion, recommendation. Seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms Newman. Item 4.2, and Mr Jones will present this report.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Council is in receipt of an application for a fitness centre situated at 10 Wright Street, Windy Bend. The application was impact accessible. Public notification was undertaken with no submissions received. The application and proposed development is generally in accordance with the planning scheme, and the recommendation is for approval subject to reasonable and relevant conditions.
Thank you, Mr Jones. Any questions, councillors, for the officer? If not, would somebody move that the development permit be issued? Moved by Councillor Purvin, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Jones. We move on to asset sustainability, item 5.1, and Mr McKee will present this report.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Yeah, we've received a petition, and the petition relates to the safety of school children, primary school children, walking and cycling along Cardwell Road to go to the Mundu State School from Maya Avenue. There's quite a large number of people signed the petition, 580, and they had support from and the police services people. Now, what they're concerned about is there's a walking track which comes, Cardwell Road runs north-south, and the Mundu School's at the top, the most northern point. And from there, there's a bitumen pathway which extends from the school down to nearly the tram track, cane tram track, and but from the cane tram track down to Leigh Street, there's very little facility for children to walk along that section of road, because there's table drains or open earth drains beside the road and very little room for footpaths. So at the moment, they've really got to walk on the road or on the shoulders of the, which is quite dangerous. There is a footpath that goes from Myer Street or Avenue up to Leigh Street. So there's a missing link between Leigh Street and just north of the rail line. So that's the area that we, the petitioners talk about a missing link in the route along there, and that's what they're talking about, from Leigh Street up to the pathway that comes down from the school. Now we looked at different, and what they're seeking is basically a full 2 metre wide concrete, that's my interpretation of what they're seeking, is a full 2 metre wide concrete pathway from Leigh Street, from Myer Street all the way to the school. For various reasons, well, firstly, the traffic counts are quite low, so there's not very high volumes. They're not very high speeds. And you can't really just, based on council's regional planning for bikeways and pathways, you can't really justify a full width concrete path from one end to the other. We had a safety person from TMR checked it out, and they said the pathway couldn't be justified as well. So it's reasonably safe for normal adult people because of the low traffic volumes and the low pedestrian volumes as well, and cyclist volume. So based on that, we can't, I don't believe we could justify the construction of a full width concrete pathway for the full distance. And the cost of that would be in excess of $500,000, $500,000. But the problem is we're dealing with primary school children, and they're generally 12 years or younger. And in my professional opinion, they shouldn't be on the road in the first place. They shouldn't be riding bikes on the road. They shouldn't be walking along the shoulders. So the only option really is to give them an off-road pathway or a footpath. And the only location I could find along that section of Cartier Road was on the eastern side between the open drain and the residence property boundary. And what we recommend is that council construct a walking track, not a full-blown pathway, but a gravel or decomposed granite track that can wind in between obstructions and services and cross driveways and provide children with a reasonably safe walking track from one end of the Cartier Road to the other. It's really a missing pedestrian link that would give them a much safer path to use. The other thing is the school itself can apply for state government funding themselves. So we would recommend that, well, it's up to council to recommend, but we would suggest that council approach the school to look at funding from the state government from their own sources rather than approaching council to provide a pedestrian walkway for the children. That's about all, I think. It's just a safety issue for children. So if council would like to, the cost of the pathway itself is about $35,000, but it would do what's required to keep the children much safer than they are.
Thank you, Mr. McKee. Yeah. Mr. Goodman, do you want to make a comment, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, councillors, if I can just point out a couple of the statistics from the report. There's actually 2 separate site inspections carried out by the engineering staff, and we are talking about quite low numbers of students utilising this path. On the first occasion in November last year, they observed 3 students using this current path. Now, obviously, I think it's reasonable to assume if the path was safer, then parents would be more comfortable encouraging their children to use it, but the numbers are quite low. On the second time of an inspection, there was a single student utilised it on that morning. So we're not talking very large numbers of students, and we are talking the general traffic in that area is relatively low, and the traffic speeds are also low as well. So I obviously support the recommendation to council. I think that's an appropriate fit-for-purpose engineering solution to improve the safety of the students to that school.
Thank you, Mr Goodman. Councillors, any questions for either Mr McKee or Mr Goodman? Councillor Pervin.
Through you, Mr Chair. Yeah, I'm in agreement with that for the path to be constructed on the eastern side there. But another query I have is the existing asphalt that currently runs down along the drain. Can any works be done to that, because it has got to a minimal size, nearly a foot wide? Probably my concern, that's probably more to look at than anything at all. There's very little footpath left there at all.
Through the chair, yes, that would be usually something. When grass usually grows over a path, it's usually indicative that the path's not getting used. But certainly there could be some maintenance works there that to remove that grass, and that's a relatively low cost. If council supports this proposal and we build this deco path, we would build that maintenance works on that asphalt path, bitumen seal path as part of that works.
Thank you, Mr Goodman. Any further questions for the officer?
Thanks, Mr Goodman.
I'll just make a comment in relation to the cost. The 2 metre wide concrete path that the petitioners requested, $500,000. What our engineers have looked at with partnership with TMR in terms of safety of not only the students, but a lot of adults use that for exercise. I've seen them myself. So it will get used. Is $35,000. So in terms of the cost, it's a no-brainer that we will support today's recommendation. I think it's significant also, the number of petitioners, 587. It's one of the biggest petitions I've ever seen as a councillor. And when you've got Queensland Police giving a letter of support, I think it'd be almost, legal stuff if we ignored it. It would be negligent of the councillors if we ignored the plea of those petitioners and Queensland Police. And of course, the PNC at Mundu School who launched this petition. Would somebody like to move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Pervins, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr McKee. We move on to asset sustainability, 5.2, and this report will be delivered by Mr Smart or Mr Goodman.
Councillors, this is the June status update for the Bulgan Reservoir contract. The project continues to progress quite well. You can see from the photos starting on page 199 that the erection of the reservoir has gone up quite quickly, particularly considering the weather conditions we've had within the last month. It is a little bit like a house where it can look as though it's nearly finished quite quickly, and then the internal fit out happens. So there's obviously, it may not be obvious, but there is a significant amount of work to do. The installation of the roof for this facility is quite a complex arrangement. The sealing of all the joints, there is a significant amount of work to continue, but it certainly remains on track to be commissioned before we would expect to be hit with turbidity events come towards the end of the year, and things are looking very positive. In terms of the precise works that were completed in June, was installation and sealing of all wall panels for the reservoir, the wall stiffeners and support rings, brackets for the reservoir stairs, poured sections of the drainage channel, excavate and place a blinding layer for the scour pit, and completed and tested the water mains, the amendments to the water mains that hook up to that reservoir. Councillors, the costs for the project, we are predicting to be slightly over the original budget, but certainly nothing of any significance for a project of this scale. And I'm quite pleased with how the project is progressing, and happy to answer any questions if councillors have any.
Thank you, Mr Goodman. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, Mr Goodman, I haven't got a question, but I just wanted to let everybody know that this is actually on the division. So you'll all get a chance to go out there and actually have an inspection of it.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. We're looking forward to that. I guess when we talk about millions of dollars being allocated for this type of infrastructure, we also need to put it into context that the government have changed the goalposts in terms of potable water, and boiled water alerts are a bad look for any council, and it's really third world country stuff if you can't supply drinking water to your residents. So we support these types of projects without hesitation, because it's an obligation each councillor has in that regard. So if there's no further questions, would somebody please move that that report be received and noted? Councillor Chewy has moved, Councillor Millwood second. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 5.3, and Mr Goodman will also present this report on the Tuldy multi-use sporting complex.
Councillors, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm presenting the June report for the Tully multi-use sporting complex and grandstand, soon to be named something else. We're working through that process. Councillors, again, this project is progressing well. There have been some delays and some minor extensions of time approved for this contract. The original contractual. Sorry, I thought I had that there right in front of me. There it is. The original contract time for practical completion was 13 July. That has been extended to 20 July. There are some additional claims by the contractor for further extensions of time that have not been fully assessed at this time. But nevertheless, the current project expected, or the advised by the contractor of their completion time as reflected in this report is 31 July. I have to say to councillors that's probably a little ambitious. We do expect that it will move into August for completion of this project. That being the case, though, we're still quite pleased with the progress that the contractor is making. They have been working in quite difficult conditions in the last couple of months, and certainly would not have wished for the cancellation of this year's show. But it is the fact that with the cancellation of the show, the slight delay to the contract has not had a significant impact on the community. Works completed in June included installation of the ceiling to the main roof, concrete works to the rear stairs, level 2 window installation, screening and waterproofing of level 1 and 2, installation of floor coverings, removal of the external scaffold, installation of the solar system on the roof, and works planned for this month include fabrication and installation of balustrading, completion of the stormwater associated with the works, demolition of the old toilet blocks, those 3 of those that have been added on to the contract since the start of that, gutters and flashings to the roof, grease trap installation and sewer connection, continuing painting and floor coverings, interior fit out, landscaping and car park works, the lift, installation of the lift and the waste chute, security system installation and commissioning, and practical completion and handover. Now, as I said earlier, it's my personal opinion that we won't achieve all of that in this current month, but very confident that will be in August. Just of interest, as I drove past this morning, I see a large amount of cardboard boxes in the main grandstand itself, and I'm quite sure that they are the seats for the grandstand, so it is really starting to come together and take shape. Councillors, I'm happy to answer any other questions you have on the project, otherwise I'll present the report.
Councillor Barnes.
Yeah, thank you, through the Chair. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Goodman. I know it's looking exceptional, but is there room in those last bit of completions just to patch up the side of the field? Because I'd say it could be used the first opportunity we have.
Yeah, we have had discussions with the contractor. It is a requirement of the contract that they make repair to any damage that they make. They have had, they have by agreement only. They have no actual contractual right to be out working on the field, and so they have been working by agreement to go outside of their restricted area that they have access to contractually, and so they've given undertakings that in the continuing of the good work that they've and relations that they've had with the sporting and community groups there in Tully, that they will absolutely make good any damage that they've made to the field, and they have started on that already.
Thanks, Mr. Goodman. Any questions or comments, councillors? If not, would somebody move that the report be received and noted? Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Perman. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 5.4, Infrastructure Services Report. Mr. Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, this report is the Infrastructure Services Capital Report, is the final report that we provide for the 1920 financial year, and the report that you see next month will start to report on the new budget and those projects. I took some time. I know I have said in recent reports, so this type of report that I have presented to council in recent months touched on the impact of our change in work practices in months recently gone by, with as we were preparing for a much bigger impact for COVID-19 than has transpired to date, and also the wet weather impacts in the last couple of months. I pulled out the January report presented to council in February just to reflect on that, and we are currently reporting $47.8 million of expenditure and committals for the end of June. At the end of January, we were actually at 44 million. So this, it was actually a really good news story where we had got up to at that stage, and unfortunately we haven't been able to progress our capital works to a significant extent in the last 5 months. But just as we know it's going to rain in this region, we know the sun will come out as well, and we anticipate getting on with those works in the coming months. So I just wanted to point that out. Certainly, what it does show, that we actually had an exceptional period July through to January, and we were on track to delivering what in my 10 years here at the Cassowary Coast would have been a significant achievement, and delivering significantly more than we have in the past in terms of our capital works. And unfortunately, the last couple of months have let us down, but we will continue to work on that and try to do better in the future. In terms of the 150 odd projects that are listed in the detail of this report, I was only going to touch on one of those, and that's at the almost the last page of this report. It is the last page of this report. The Fleet Digital Radio and GPS project. That was we did have a plan to complete that in the last financial year, and just at the last couple of weeks we got pipped at the post there. So that is a significant project to improve the safety, among other things, safety of our workforce, and provide a much better quality radio network and connectivity right throughout the region. It will be a process which finally properly amalgamates the old Cardwell Shire network and the old Johnson Shire network into one Cassowary Coast Regional Council radio network. And we look forward to the benefits of that going throughout for Council, and that will be, it's now expected to be completed this month. And apart from that, if the councillors have any questions on any individual projects, I'll do my best.
Any questions, Councillor? Councillor Millwood.
Through the Chair, Mr Goodman, this is probably not to do with the actual report, but I did read that we were successful in receiving the grant for Works for Queensland. Is that right?
Yeah, I have heard that this morning. I haven't read the detail of that, but perhaps the CEO could provide some more detail.
Yeah, through you, Mr Chairman, there's some work yet to be done in terms of executing the funding agreement and so on before that information can be made fully public. I'd anticipate that within the next few weeks we'll have more and better information on that.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Any further questions for Mr Goodman, councillors? If not, would somebody move that the council receive the report and acknowledge the status of capital works? Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Toohey. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Mr Goodman. We now have a late agenda item, and this will be presented by Mr Crosby.
Morning, councillors. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, you have before you a copy of a report in relation to the organisational structure, and that report provides an update in respect of outcomes post-consultation process that has occurred in relation to the report that was tabled with Council on the 20th of May. There is a series of recommendations in the report that I trust that you have read, and I think what I will do is simply take it that they have been read, and then pass back to the Chair to either ask for any questions or after that make a decision in respect of those recommendations.
Thanks, Mr Crosby. Any questions for the officer on that restructure report? I'd just like to make a couple of comments. Thank you, Mr Crosby, for preparing this, and the report delivers some great outcomes, so I'd just like to summarise, if you don't mind. Cherry pick your report. I note that the recommendation is, if accepted by Council, will create 8 new permanent positions in an area which I refer to as blue collar, salt of the earth, our permanent team. It also creates an administrative support position, so more employment still. I think that is wonderful as well. Great outcome. These positions will provide for stable full-time employment for 9 people and will have the opportunity to enjoy all the benefits which flow from that stability. This could well include the ability to gain home loans, amongst many other positives for them and our region, and will provide them an enhanced ability to continue and contribute in our region. I note importantly that this will not result in an increase in our cost, as we will achieve savings in our contractual expenses to offset the wage expense, so I support the recommendation strongly. I am particularly pleased to see the recommendation to establish 2 new plumber apprenticeships and 1 new fitter apprenticeship. This recommendation responds to a community expectation and reflects on my pre-election undertaking to work towards the employment and training of young men and women, improving skills of our young people in our region and retaining them so that they can and will contribute to the Cassowary Coast. So 12 new positions all up. All of this will be achieved with a saving in our operational budget of at least $905,900 in the first year and at least $1 million in subsequent years. I say at least, as I believe there is a possibility of subsidies being gained towards the apprenticeships, and I believe you have not factored in the subsidies as you wanted to have a conservative approach to the projections. On that basis, realistically, we can only do better. I take pleasure in moving the recommendation be accepted. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Barnes. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Crosby. Sorry, Councillor Millwood.
So through the chair, Mr. Crosby, could you just please explain to the public that not all the 12 positions are actually new positions?
Councillor, of the 12 roles, there are 3 apprenticeship opportunities which are new. There are 6 labouring opportunities. These labouring opportunities that we're talking about are currently roles that council does hire through labour hire. Nonetheless, those roles don't exist in council's establishment, and so they are new in respect of positions on council's establishment. There is a new role of a senior operator in the water and wastewater treatments area, which will be new. There will be 1 new supervisor of capital works, which is new, and there's also a position of an administration officer in the water area, which also currently doesn't exist as a permanent position either in council structure, so that's also new.
Happy with that response, Councillor Millwood?
Thank you.
So in summary, the recommendation we just adopted will deliver 12 new permanent positions, particularly in the blue-collar sector, and most importantly, opportunity for our youth in 3 apprenticeships. So I think it's a great outcome. It's, if you like, phase 2 of our restructure. The savings were delivered by a resolution adopted about 4 weeks ago. We're delivering the other section of that report now in terms of creating new jobs and new opportunities, not only for our residents but also for our youth. I think it's a great outcome. Okay, we now move into, that's the end of the open meeting. We need to go into confidential for 2 items, and I just want to supplement the reason we're going into into confidence is because this is commercial in confidence and it's very sensitive to the tenderers. So, Councillor Millwood, you're moving, we go into...
Just before we move into that, I would just like to pass on my condolences to the Jones family in Tully with the passing of Mary yesterday, who was a very active member of our community. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Millwood. That will be noted in the minutes, and thank you for that contribution. Okay, confidential, as I said, we're doing this because it's commercial in confidence and sensitive to the tenderers. Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Barnes. Okay, all in favour? It's carried, that's unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, just go to general business. Do we have any general business items, please? Councillor Millwood.
But I've got a question for Mr. Singh. The community are asking why the budget didn't show any of the legal costs or refunds. So for a bit of transparency, could some feedback please be provided for these matters?
Over to you, Mr. Singh.
Just through the chair, just clarification on the question. When we're talking budget, are we talking 2020, 2021? Next financial year? Current. So councils, if we're talking about this financial year, we will have our finance report that will come in the next council meeting, which would be in a fortnight's time. And as part of that report, the finance report will have all the figures for this financial year and actuals and how we are tracking. And if there is any specific question around legal, then we can answer that. From where we are in terms of numbers, there is no further update on any legal recovery money. So we haven't seen any additional money come in, and there hasn't been, from my recollection of the expenditure, and that is purely based on my memory. I don't recall seeing any increase in the legal expenses for the month of June, but I will clarify that that is subject to the preparation of the report.
Through the chair, thank you, Mr. Singh.
Councillor Farinelli.
Just further to that, I think the community quite rightly are a little bit anxious about wanting to know a little bit more information about what's happening with regards to money that's been spent on legal issues and reporting and what they're allowed to know or what they're not allowed to know. Is there going to be some more information, Mr. Mayor, moving forward on what the community is able to be made aware of? I mean, they're the reason why we've got money to spend on legal fees, so I think they quite rightly want to know what we are spending on. And further to that, there was a bit of angst over the reduced financial report in the previous one being only 12 pages. Just want to make sure, or just check whether moving forward, will we be going back to a full report on financial issues rather than just the 12 pages that we were given last time?
I'll hand over to Mr. Singh to respond to that question.
So councillors, just to provide additional information and clarity, so in terms of where we are, the legislation actually doesn't require us to go to the level of detail that we normally provide. So we have been quite transparent in the previous months and obviously in the last couple of years, whereby we go to the length of providing that information. And I think what is important, it is important to highlight, we have stated before, with the resources involved in putting a fairly large document together does take a lot of time. So what we did last month was because of the pressure of doing the budget and also doing the reports, we decided to move back to a smaller and a more compressed report, which is more at a very high level, which is at a whole of council level. Legislatively, we are only required to present that, and as far as meeting the legislation, we have met that last month. But going forward for the June report, we will revert back to the normal report, and part of the reason why we didn't present the report today has been because of our involvement with the budget, so that has now done. So the staff should be able to put a comprehensive report for June. So that will include the usual figures and our usual commentaries around that. Going forward, I think what is important to also note is council, under the legislations and with the assistance of the Queensland Audit Office, what we'll do is we will prepare our financial statements. So in our financial statements, we will disclose what our legal expenditure is. So that is something that we have been doing for the last couple of years. It is a requirement, so we do it. So the figures are there. If someone is interested in individual cases and information around each legal expenditure and what we have spent on specific legal cases, we normally don't disclose that to that level of detail. The previous legal advice has been that we are, for a particular matter, we are not required, or we are not in a position to disclose those numbers purely in relation to a specific legal case. But at a very high level, we do disclose. And also, I'll just again draw the attention of the councillors. In terms of our disclosure, we do disclose our related party transactions under the legislation, and when we disclose our KMP related transactions, we don't normally disclose if there is any expenditure related to KMPs. So KMPs would include the councillors and also the executive team. So that disclosure will be there. So we are required to disclose it. So the level of disclosure that we provide to the community, to council, are legislated. They are required and mandatory. So we do meet those. But if there is an appetite to disclose additional information, I think that is something that we have been informed that it is under legal privilege. And going forward, obviously, we will seek again advice from our solicitors, and potentially when we are in a position to disclose those information, we will disclose it to the community.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Any further questions or comments? I'd just like to summarise by saying that Mr. Singh has committed to a full financial at the next meeting, and he's explained that the budget took a lot of his time away with his staff trying to prepare the budget. As you know, we had a little input into the budget. The staff really did the majority of the work in terms of drafting the budget we adopted. The other part of the question about any further information coming forward, this week I spoke to the CEO, and he's spoken to our governance officer to go back to our insurers asking for another update, which we did about a month, 6 weeks ago, and they rejected it. But I feel, given the recent OIC release from a resident's right to information, there is information out there, and I'm comfortable as Mayor for Ms Johnson to go back to our insurers seeking another report. That's in the system right now. That happened this week. Further, I think councillors and the community at large can take a lot of comfort in relation to spending and costs in relation to our legals. Those figures are looked at by our audit committee. Our audit committee, internal and external, have not come back to us in our short period in this term and said things are out of whack, red flags. They have not said that. Councillor Farinelli and I sit on the internal audit committee. Councillor Baines attends as an observer, and I can guarantee categorically the audit committee, the umpire, the third umpire, who look over our shoulder and check every dollar and every cent, have not put up a red flag around the legals. So there's a process we've got to go through. The insurer refused 6 weeks ago, but I've gone back to the CEO this week seeking a release of more information from the lawyers that look after our insurance company. So I think you can be comforted by the fact that our audit committee have said everything's above board. Otherwise, they'd be breaching corporate law, and they're not that silly to do that. And I think we need to have trust in the third umpire, and that's why we have our audit committee.
Mr. Mayor, can I make a comment?
Mr. Singh.
Just councils also, please note going forward into the new financial year. So what we do generally every beginning of every term is we go back to the new council and we take them through what we normally consider is a part of our continuous improvement, and also the need for information shifts when we have new councillors. So going into the next financial year, which will begin from July onwards, or has already started. So when we start reporting for next financial year and onwards for the next couple of years, we will, as a team, the finance team will actually review the finance reports that come. So potentially there will be changes where we will actually start moving away from this into more a condensed version of the report rather than going the way we are. And part of the process that we normally follow, and the reason for us going to the level of detail in the past has been we haven't had a lot of those information available internally on dashboards, whereas with the investment that we've made in the infrastructure that we have now, a lot of the information that we present to councillors are actually live information that sit on dashboards, and we can access a lot of it now. And potentially with us moving into the space of services catalogues and looking at our services in a different manner, the likelihood of that report being continued is going to change. So I just wanted to flag it with you guys and also the community. So from our end, as part of our continuous improvement, we'll change the way in what level of information we disclose. So it's just that. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Any further questions, Councillor Barnes?
Yeah, just on a lighter note, I'd just like to think it's exciting times to see the COVID starting to lift in our libraries and council business getting back to norm, and all our businesses and the markets are on in Cardwell this weekend and many other attractions in our community. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Any further comments? Councillor Pervin.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Just I'd like to offer condolences to Mary Patterson on the passing away of Duncan Patterson. Duncan attributed a lot to the community and many community groups over the year, so I'd just like that to be noted. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Pervin. The passing of Duncan Patterson will be noted in our minutes. Thank you for that acknowledgement. Councillors, we go to the...
One more, Mr. Chair,
sorry,
before we
Councillor.
run away. Councillor Chewy and myself attended a community meeting in Mission Beach last week about caring for cassowaries. As you know, there's been a few incidents with cassowary vehicle interactions over the region in the past month. It was well supported by Department of Environment and Science. We had Queensland Parks reps there, and very positive meeting, Mr. Mayor. So I look forward to working with the broader community as well. Being Cassowary Coast, the entire area is the home of these significant birds. There's some great works being done in that arena already. DTMR are starting work on the overpass at Smith's Gap, which is an overtaking lane project, and they're going to do a world first wildlife crossing bridge. It has been a little contentious, but it's federally government funded. They've put the money towards this, and there's been a lot of community engagement and NRM engagement. So just more a heads up for everyone. It was a great meeting. We'll put another one together shortly, which I'd like to expand out into the greater region. My probably best take out of the whole thing was a slogan that was rolled around on the day that went into speeding and feeding, not cool. Don't do it with cassowaries. Don't speed, and please do not feed the birds. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baines. Any further comment, councillors? If not, we'll move on to item 7.1. The recommendation is before you. There's 4 dot points there, but the contract be awarded to Realigning Solutions Proprietary Limited. Somebody move that recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And item 7.2, the recommendation, dot point 1 and dot point 2. Somebody move that, please. Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, that concludes our local government meeting for today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.